Alright guys, welcome back to another episode of my mini-series here where we break down the NFL draft from fans' perspective, from my perspective. For those of you who are just now jumping into the middle of the series, there's a couple of episodes that are preceding this one. It's not that big of a deal as far as which order you necessarily watch this in, but there are some episodes that come before this. I'm trying to make these as independent as humanly possible, so listening to these in order is not necessarily all that important. Today's episode we're going to be talking about a very important subject in regards to character flaws. Character flaws, in my opinion, coming from players coming out of college is an issue that is very, very important, especially when it comes to the evaluation process of a league prospect at the college ranks or from anywhere else, to tell you the truth. The NFL gets a majority of their players from the collegiate level. A good majority. It's not like basketball or any other sport. There are a few players, very few players, who kind of bypass the whole collegiate system and go straight into the NFL, but very, very few actually do. So the collegiate system is a farm system for the NFL. So a majority of these football players that you see that play on Sunday are all guys that have had prior experience playing in college. Now, the character flaw situation is a situation that it plagues the league. It's been plaguing the league since the league's inception, to tell you the honest to God truth. In the last several years, the league has searched for ways to try to mitigate some of these issues from these players coming into the league that are be making all this money and try to get them to be able to produce for the NFL product as opposed to showing the NFL in a negative limelight. Because when these guys end up screwing up in real life situations, it ends up becoming a huge black mark, and it ends up becoming a huge black eye for the league, and the league takes it as negative publicity. Now, that's one of the things that needs to be understood about the NFL that most of us already know, is that the league is a business. The NFL is a business. It is a business that is that has many, many different owners that are associated with it. There's advertising, there's television rights, there's millions and millions of dollars that changes hands every single year to get this product on on your screens, whether it's tablet, telephone, or television. The league is very, very much interested in painting itself in a very, very positive light, the most positive light it possibly can, because the negative publicity is associated with giving basically young men a whole crap ton of money. There's all kinds of pitfalls that are associated with it. The league has a particular stance, particular rules that are put into place as far as what they would deem as good behavior and bad behavior. And as far as I know, there's no actual real set of guidelines, and this is the thing that's very, very interesting about how the NFL is run. You've got a guy who basically sits at the top, at Roger Goodell, who is the NFL commissioner. He's pretty much one of the guys that sits at the very, very top, that kind of decides by himself as far as if you're going to be a troublesome player, what the ramifications of your error should be. He's the one that takes a look at these kids who have drug habits, these kids who end up in the limelight for domestic abuse, assault, whatever the situation may be, getting caught with a gun illegally. He is the one that decides, okay, this is what's going to happen with this particular player. I don't exactly know what his process is. A lot of people don't know what his process is. But based on the penalties in which he incurs over said infraction, tries to reflect the league's opinion on that particular infraction. And sometimes you get somebody who's got multiple infractions who ends up either out of the league or ends up without getting a paycheck, ends up sitting out games, whatever. These players get paid by the game. So if you end up having a player that sits 3 or 4 games, that is a pretty hefty penalty that is being lofted down from Roger Goodell. And Roger Goodell has taken a lot of heat himself for not necessarily being consistent with this policy, being consistent with some of these ramifications that come out. Sometimes you got rape allegations that you got players that sit up for a certain period of time, and you got players who end up getting into domestic situations where they end up beating people up, and the two ramifications don't necessarily match itself. Either way, in my opinion, honestly, as they tell you later on, you don't necessarily want to come in with character issues and get into trouble with Roger Goodell or get painted in a negative light amongst some of your owners, because Roger Goodell is going to put the target on your head. That's definitely a place that you don't want to be if you are a player in the league. You do not want the attention of a Roger Goodell to be focused on you in a negative light, because he's very heavy-handed with some of the ramifications that he comes down with. Some of you may or may not agree with that, but he is the guy that sits at the top. Moving on to the collegiate level. In my opinion, the collegiate level is a very, very different aspect from the NFL. It's a business as well. It is a program-run business, in my opinion. A lot of these coaches and a lot of these programs are trying to do whatever it is they can to keep players on the field. And that is their number one thing, is keep the players on the field. College, in my opinion, will bypass a lot of character flaws just to get the player on the field to proliferate their program. They will hide a lot of character flaws. So the NFL, I think, in some cases, sometimes runs into issues with character flaws that they may not have known before, that they have found out later on that certain college programs may have already seen coming for a long time. I don't need to go into the history of Penn State or the history of a lot of these college programs that have hid character flaws, and we didn't find out until these kids started making millions and millions of dollars that they had issues and have had issues for a long time. So a lot of these programs that are coming a lot of these programs that are NCAA programs will often hide some of these character issues, and it's the NFL, is incumbent upon the NFL to try to uncover what some of these issues are. Now the big question is, what happens when you have a character flaw in an issue or a character issue with a player, and he's able to go through a collegiate program and get into the NFL where he's able to make millions and millions of dollars? Does that kind of investment, does that kind of money actually bring out the positive things in that player? 9 times out of 10 it doesn't. A lot of times it doesn't, and it's really it comes down to the player. It comes down to the type of person that the player is. Some of these players, they've messed up just once in their life, and it was a huge mistake, and these guys are kids. Every kid makes mistakes, and a lot of these guys are trying to look for a reason to work on their issues, to become better people and surround themselves with good people, and they end up becoming fine football players and fine upstanding members of society, whatever you want to call it. And then there's other individuals that are going to do everything that they can to skate by as, and have as much fun as they possibly can, and not necessarily listen to all of the boring people that tell them all the awesome and positive things to do with themselves, and are constantly in trouble. Your guess is as good as mine as to which these people are. Every single draft has them. Every single draft, you pay attention to every single draft class, there's always a handful of players that are probably going to be going in the first 2 rounds that have character flaw issues. Choices that they've made that are going to drop them down. And the difference between first round and third round draft selection is millions and millions of dollars. So if you have a guy who's made a horrible decision or has made a mistake that ends up being a first round draft prospect and ends up getting bumped down to the 3rd or 4th round, he has just cost himself millions of dollars in contract money based on that decision. And that happens all the time. So that's something to take into account as well. That some of these players, you don't necessarily know if this is going to be an issue that's going to rear its ugly head throughout their career, or if this is just a one-time thing. Anybody can take a look at some of the financial decisions that some of these guys make. Also, the allure of making millions of dollars and being able to spend all your money on all your wildest dreams and buy your mom a house and get all these cars and all these women. It doesn't take multiple viewings of Billy Corben's documentary Broke to understand that is an issue. And from what I understand, the league has actually turned away from the financial responsibility aspect of this in their Rookie Symposium, which I'll get to later, because they've had to condense it to other issues and narrow it down to a 4-day course, and there's only so much that you can get into that program. So the financial aspect of this situation is one that's going to be interesting in the next 10 years to find out, with the ousting of that into Rookie Symposium, how is that going to reflect today and tomorrow's NFL football player. One of the things that I will say about players today is I think a lot of these players today have wisely learned from their predecessors. They have seen some of the stuff that's happened on TV. They've heard a lot of the stories, some of the emphasis that former football players will put on the careers that they've had and the choices that they've made to make sure that the players beneath them don't make the same mistakes that they do. I think that today's players are a little bit more savvy as far as how to be a little bit more responsible, whether it be financially, whether it be amongst their friends, who they surround themselves with, where it is that they hang out, what it is that they do for fun, and realize that those decisions can drastically affect the money that they make and their position on their team. You got a lot of former athletes that come out that try to help with these soon-to-be athletes in the NFL as well. And this comes in many, many different forms. Some of these assets, you're taking a look, some of these guys throw clinics. A lot of these guys have clinics, off-season clinics, that help these players out, to help them make better decisions, to help them boost up their financial knowledge, to give them advice on how to be able to handle some of these off-the-field situations. You have financial services. Some of these guys have come up with financial services, whether it's accounting, whether it's what have you, to be able to help some of these players. These guys are specifically designed and want to be able to help NFL football players make these better decisions. Some of these guys have been very, very successful with making a signing bonus or making their NFL career, however short-lived it may have been, to be able to take that money and stretch it out over the course of 10, 20, 30 years, to be able to put their kids through college, put them in a comfortable home, be able to get some return on their investment. So a lot of them have financial services that they're able to provide for rookie players. Also, you have some of these guys that turn agent. Some of these agents have explicit NFL knowledge and know what some of the pitfalls are and know how to negotiate in that process. So a lot of these players today have better assets than some of the players in the past have had. Now, one of the things I've talked about before was the Rookie Symposium, and a lot of us know what the Rookie Symposium is, and I'm not going to go into a whole lot of details as far as what the Rookie Symposium is. If you want to know what the Rookie Symposium is, there's plenty of YouTube videos out there that kind of tell you and give you an idea of exactly what that process is and what it entails, and it's a very, very good process, although it would probably be boring to a lot of people. But it helps players transition from the collegiate level to the pro level, and all the decisions that they're going to have to make for themselves and the position that they have found themselves in. Now that they have reached their goal, what are they looking to expect? Basically real talk, the real aspects of becoming a professional football player, and how the league wants you to conduct yourself, how these teams would like for you to conduct yourself, because you're representing the NFL shield, you're representing the NFL product, and the things that they would like to see you do as a player, and the things that they definitely would not like to see you do as a player. And some of these players that come in, former players, have tragic stories, and they try to share those to deter some of these players from making those same decisions. And sometimes they'll bring in people who have success stories, people that other players have looked up to, people that they've looked up to since they were kids, to try to motivate them to make better decisions for themselves. So the symposium is a very, very good asset that the NFL has been able to use based on past experience to try to help the NFL football player transition from their parents making decisions for them, to their coaches and their collegiate teams making decisions for them, to now them having to make decisions for themselves. And it's a very, very difficult transition, especially when you start throwing millions and millions of dollars, an infinite number of choices for these guys to make at a very, very immature level. The symposium tries to close that gap a little bit and help some of these players out. So that's very, very positive to see. And it really ultimately it comes down to the player. What does the player want to get out of a situation like a Rookie Symposium? A Rookie Symposium is mandatory for every single NFL prospect that gets drafted in the NFL draft. If you end up getting drafted by a football team, it is required of you to attend the NFL Rookie Symposium. If you do not attend by choice, and if it's not an emergency that the Rookie Symposium or the NFL deems necessary to skip, you're going to suffer heavy ramifications for that, and it's probably going to come in the form of financial restitution, which is going to be very, very heavy. So it is who of every NFL prospect to go to this Rookie Symposium and try to learn as much as you can. But you got some of these players, I'm sure, that go through the motions, that just sit there and listen to people talk, and when they get out of that process, they really haven't learned anything, and they don't care to learn anything. They just want to go out and play their game and make their money, and kind of let the chips fall where they may, pretty much. So it really comes down to the player and what it is that they want to be able to take out of a situation like that, because the NFL is going to provide the path to success. They're not going to be able to make these kids walk that path of success. That's going to be up to each one of those players. And one of the interesting aspects as far as this character issue in this episode that I find fascinating is the assets that each NFL team has available to them to try to bridge that gap themselves. They're going to do work outside of what is normal NFL channels. They're going to go through NFL channels, everything that is required of them to go through that rookie process to try to draft these players, but they're also going to take steps, unconventional steps outside of what the league mandates, because we're talking about multi-million-dollar investments here. We're talking about teams that are spending millions and millions of dollars that want to try to make the most educated decision humanly possible, and if it means going a little bit unconventional to do that, you will. We're talking about some of these teams actually have assets available to them, investigative assets. We're talking about investigators, people that go out and try to find and dig up dirt on people that, from what I understand and what I have read in the past, some of these investigative processes and some of these investigative agencies can rival the FBI. They have all kinds of assets available to them to try to find the nitty-gritty on each one of these players. And not sure how I feel about that, but it's very, very interesting to see that teams will actually go that far to be able to do that. Some of the intel that they may get from college programs may not necessarily reveal all the character flaws, because to reveal character flaws in a lot of high-end players could also reveal the character flaws in the program, and a lot of these programs are not necessarily going to pony up at that. So you're going to go outside of college programs to try to find out what it is that you can about each individual player. And what it is that these teams will do, the intel that these teams will collect on these players is actually very impressive. These guys will use local law enforcement. Local law enforcement, they will ask about public records, even records that are not even necessarily available to the public. And I'm sorry, but I am almost certain that some of these kids who have sealed juvenile records miraculously, with enough money, get unsealed so that they can see exactly what type of person it is that they're dealing with. So that's very interesting to know as well, that if it's on public record or if it's not a part of public record, if it's a part of your record, they're going to pretty much find out what it is, and they're going to talk to the people associated with that situation. So if you're involved in a situation where you end up getting into a domestic violence issue at the age of 15, you made a poor choice, and college tend to overlook it, you can bet that the NFL is probably going to find out what that is, and they're going to ask every single situation involved with that decision, the people that were witness to it, the cops that took the report on it, everything associated with it, try to learn what type of decision-making process you had at the age of 15, and whether you're going to be whether it's going to be a process you're going to want to repeat when you're 20 or 22. Who knows? So those are all things that I think that a lot of teams have available to them. Also, they're going to talk to teachers, they're going to talk to coaches, they're going to talk to parole officers, they're going to talk to family members, they're going to talk to neighbors, they're going to talk to rival schools, rival coaches. They're going to go through all kinds of different things to try to find out exactly what type of a player you are, especially if we're taking a look at a player who is a top first round, second round draft selection, somebody that you're going to be paying millions of dollars based on a selection to try to get on your football squad. You're going to learn everything that you possibly can about that individual. Also, some of these teams will have protection details and handlers. If you guys know what a handler is, there was actually one on a Dallas Cowboy handler a couple years ago that was that hit ESPN or MMQB. I cannot necessarily remember exactly which one. The money that was being shipped under the table to this guy so that he could handle some of the off-field issues that were coming down on the franchise to help protect the franchise and protect the asset is absolutely phenomenal to me. Protection details. Some of these individuals go out and make really, really piss-poor decisions. And if they're going to make piss-poor decisions, well, then you assign a protection detail to try to mitigate that as much as humanly possible. I'm going to let your mind run wild on exactly what that means. Some of these teams feel that they have enough assets available to them that if you are a problematic player, if you are somebody who's going to make poor decisions, that they actually might have enough assets available to them to try to coach you into making better decisions. That's why you see teams that really roll the dice and take chances on players who have problematic pasts. Dallas is definitely one of them. The Oakland Raiders is definitely another a team out there that's been able to do that. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You got a lot of teams out there that actually feel that they have the assets available to them, the personnel within the organization to try to steer these kids to making better decisions when you start throwing millions and millions of dollars at them. And mind you, the league is filled with success stories. They're filled with failures, and your guess is as good as mine as to which is which. The one thing that you can basically take into account is that your team, when it comes to delegating or taking a look at character flaws and character issues, when it comes to your team making a top draft selection, you're going to be hearing a lot of things in the media, and a lot of the media, you have to understand, these guys have to have sources that have to be, you have to have multiple sources if you're going to make certain accusations. law enforcement and investigative services and NFL franchises don't necessarily have to have those things. They don't necessarily have to have the normal conventional ways of gathering intelligence. So you can almost bet that every single NFL draft prospect that there ever is going to be in an NFL draft, that these teams are going to know a crap ton more about these kids than you are. I find it interesting. Every single year we learn every little tidbit about every little draft prospect, whether it's good or whether it's bad, and yet we formulate our opinions based on what it is that we hear through the media. The one thing that I think that is important that you take away from this episode, one of the things that I try to take into account whenever I'm evaluating talent, is that if there is a problematic player, you don't necessarily want to formulate your opinion based on what the media is telling you. The media is only going to give you a certain window into what that individual has done or the decisions that they have made. You can pretty much bet that if your team is looking at drafting that player, your team has done a sincere amount of due diligence on that player. And if they do end up drafting that player, that there has probably been all kinds of resources, oodles and oodles of money that have been dumped into those resources, and to learn and to find out exactly what is going on with that player to come to the conclusion that we want to take a chance on this individual. There are a lot of players, the Johnny Manziels, a lot of individuals that have been first round draft selections that got bumped down to second round, third round, not necessarily because of their performance on the football field, but probably because of their performance off of it. So unless if you're a pass rusher or a quarterback, there really isn't a whole lot that you can hide from, especially when it comes to the information technology that is available out there. There is no more he said, she said, because everything's on camera. So if it's put out there on social media as well, that's another asset that a lot of teams use, that a lot of reporters use. So try not to formulate too much of an opinion on what the media tells you as far as character flaws in some of these players are concerned, because these teams know a heck of a lot more than what the media does, and probably what you do. Unfortunately, you're going to have to take it as a grain of salt. You're going to have to take it as an aspect of your draft evaluation process, and just kind of hope for the best when it comes to drafting these players and seeing what kind of talent they're going to be able to bring you, but also cross your fingers when they're not on the football field and hope that they make the right decisions off of it. So if you guys have any comments on this or any processes of your own when it comes to evaluating talent, I'd love to hear it. A lot of these guys hold their cards close to the chest, close to the vest. Maybe you guys have personal stories in regards to this issue, but that's going to do it for this issue, or this episode of my rating NFL talent for the NFL draft, going into character flaws. Look for a couple more videos here coming in the near future. Thanks.